Are you ready to have your mind blown? I think you are. I think you are. I think that's why you watch videos like this. Yeah. Yeah. This is my channel, The Weather in Space. I'm Aja. This is where I talk about all the fun stuff. The paranormal, UFOs, Bigfoot, all the fun things. All of them. And today is a gross, gray, rainy day, and it seems like a book day. Yeah. And these books behind me are some of my favorite books. I love these books. These books have changed my life. They've blown my mind. Ooh, I love these books so much. Yeah, so let's get to the real fun stuff first. The books that'll blow your mind. So this is the first one. This is The Magus of Java. This book, how did I come across it? I think I was in like a chat space or like in the comments section, somebody was like, oh, you've got to read this book called The Magus of Java, and I picked it up. Let me see if I can summarize it quickly. So this guy, the guy who wrote the book, saw this documentary, I forget what it was called, where he saw, it was about bioenergy, and he saw this guy perform pyrokinesis, basically lighting stuff on fire with your mind. And he was like, I gotta find this guy. I need to know who he is. I need to know what he does. I need to know more about this. And he eventually tracks him down to Java. And he begs him to take him on as an apprentice. And after some going back and forth, he eventually does agree to take him on as an apprentice. And the things that this guy witnesses, the things that he sees his teacher do, the things that he learns to do himself, it's like, it's wild. It's really wild. The biggest takeaway that I got from this book was, well, no, I took away a lot of things from this book. But one story that stands out in my mind, which I think will kind of give you an idea of what this book is like. Basically, his teacher, his Shifu, practices something called Nagong. And it's cultivating chi. It's cultivating chi energy, and he stores it inside of his body. And when he was on the road, he saw something ahead, and he knew he was going to get in an accident. So what he did is he pulled out his yin chi, and he used that to absorb the blow of the collision. And the guy walked away without a scratch on him. People at the scene were like, "How are you still alive?" And he was like, "I cultivate my chi." What I got from the book is that it wasn't confirmed, but from spending all that time with him, the author of the book kind of puts together his teacher's backstory. And that's wild as fuck, too. There are some stories in there that, even if they're not true, they get you thinking. And continuing with books to blow your mind, I have Breakthrough by Whitley Strieber. If you don't know, Whitley Strieber is the person who wrote the book Communion, which was paradigm changing. I think Communion actually brought the whole gray alien aesthetic into like the zeitgeist. And I read Communion. Communion was awesome. But the books that really like stayed with me were the works that Whitley did after Communion, where he kind of expands on his time with the visitors. He calls them the visitors because he does not know if they are actually alien. He doesn't know what they are. They exhibit so many different qualities and traits. He feels like just to call them alien kind of does them a disservice. But I love Breakthrough because Whitley talks about a lot of the experiences that he had, not just with aliens or with visitors, but also the things that he kind of started to develop since they came into his life. Really, really interesting stories. I think at one point in this book, he talks about how he was at his cabin in upstate New York, which is where the whole events of Communion took place. And he said that there was someone there who just kind of stalked him in the bushes. Well, maybe stalked isn't the right word because he wasn't a threat, but he was definitely watching him and his family, and he chain smoked. He finally confronted this person, and this person was not human. He was very strange. He had the body in like the shape of a child, but the face of maybe somebody who was 70 or 80 years old, and he chain smoked. That probably explains the skin. And when he tried to talk to this person, he opened his mouth and let out like this guttural, blood-curdling growl. and Whitley got the hell out of there. Another story that stands out to me from this book is just like Whitley does a lot of stuff with high strangeness, which is actually more interesting to me than like the normal ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot type thing. And Whitley, throughout his life, has experienced high strangeness. There's a story in the book where he's taking his son's friend home. I think that's what it is. And while they're driving on this road that's very familiar to him, all of a sudden it became not so familiar to him. The houses were weird, with weird colors, and everything seemed very foreign. They were both like really freaked out. And just as easily as they drove into this strange place, they drove out of it. Now they were back on familiar roads, and the kid said, "I never want to come back out here with you again." Whitley talks about those strange things like that that have happened to him throughout his life, and especially since the visitors came into his life. I love the stories in this book. He really talks about not only what happened, but the psychological and mental effect that they had on him, and how he grew from them. It's beautiful. I love it. And continuing with Whitley Strieber, there's another book called The Key. I have a copy of it, which I can't find right now. But this is another book that really blew my socks off. You know, Whitley really has a way of doing that. Like his stories, his books, they're all just so odd. But he goes so deeply into them. They're so captivating. One of my favorite authors of all time. But in the book, The Key, wow, okay. So Whitley's an author. And I think he was on a book tour. And then one night, probably like at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, he gets a knock on his hotel room door. And in walks this guy who looks perfectly normal, but begins to say the craziest stuff you would ever imagine. And at this point, Whitley's kind of used to strange things happening to him. So the man started the conversation, and Whitley said, "This seems like it's going to be really important." He got out a notebook and started taking notes. And the book, The Key, is basically a transcript of that conversation that he had with that strange man. This book, whoa, talk about giving you something to think about. Woo, they talk about life. They explore death. They talk about the abduction phenomena. And this man... Okay, so the concepts that they cover in the book are concepts that I've read about before. They've been introduced to me before, but this guy doesn't sugarcoat it. He talks about the history of the human race. He talks about the future of the human race. The thing that stood out to me the most about this book was his discussion of us human beings. He kind of prefaces it by saying a shadow has been cast over this planet. And in a way, I think I know what he's talking about. Hi, it's me from the future. In that video, I go on to talk about predation and how something has to kill in order to live as the shadow that's been cast over the planet. But that's not it. That was wrong. It's fear. He's talking about fear. He talks about how fear has gripped every living being on the planet, from the largest blue whale to the smallest microbe. All of us live in the shadow of fear. That's the shadow that he's talking about. And he's saying that Earth eventually evolved intelligent beings because of this. This is our task as human beings. We have to square the circle. What does that mean? He says that we have to answer the unanswerable. We have to reconcile the irreconcilable, to clear the vision of the living. And I love it when things kind of overlap, because Bashar, this entity that's channeled by Daryl Anka, talked about the same thing. He kind of talked about this story of the watermelon seed. If you take a watermelon seed and squeeze it between your fingers hard enough, it won't go up, it won't go down, it won't go to the side, but eventually it will shoot out in a new direction. And that's what we humans have to do. We have to create that new direction. I've been trying to figure out how to explain that for a while, and I think that was pretty clear. So good. Another interesting story about The Key. Whitley published this like a long time ago. I had one of the initial, or what is it, like the first printings, first publishings, or whatever, and then like, you know, I eventually gave it away. But he took it out of print. And once it was out of print, he kind of was looking on eBay and other places and noticed that his book was now selling for like $150, $200. And Whitley was like, no, we can't have that. No, I'll put the book back into print. And then once he did, I kind of got my new copy. It should be available for you to find, should you feel so inclined to read it. And if you do, I recommend going to Whitley Strieber's website, Unknown Country, and just buying it from him. And while you're there, why not check out his podcast, Dreamland? Because of Whitley's background, a lot of people come to him with information. I guess they feel comfortable talking with him. He interviews these people on his podcast, and he shares some of his stories. Every Halloween, he shares one of his stories from the past, and it's always really, really good. I always love it. So really, I really recommend you check out Dreamland. You should. You'll be doing yourself a favor. And just a note about the key. There are some things in that book that might be a little controversial. My approach to things that are controversial or possibly offensive is just to make a note of it. Just make a note and then move on. Don't get too emotional about it. Don't get too invested in it, because, that stops the fun. And now the books that changed my life. This is the first one that I have to mention. This is the Conversations with God book by Neale Donald Walsch. This one's kind of thick because this is actually books 1, 2, and 3, like put into one, kind of like an omnibus. Is that the word? When I was a senior in college, I had a professor who I actually didn't like very much at the beginning, but we did kind of have some conversations, and she was like, I have a book that I think you'll like, and that's when she gave me Conversations with God, book 1. Blew my mind. Totally changed the way I saw the world, and that book came into my hands at precisely the right time. So as you can see, I have a lot of notes. I love this book. I refer to it often. Neale Donald Walsch, regular Joe Schmo, lived an interesting life. He had a lot of experiences, but life was still lifing, and it got tough sometimes. And then one day he just became so frustrated and he couldn't sleep, so he got up in the middle of the night. He took out a legal pad and just started writing an angry letter to God. And then once he kind of got it all out, he noticed that God started answering back. And all of this was written down, and eventually it was made into a book. So that was book 1. Book 1 was kind of like a what is going on in my life. Book 2 covers what's going on in the world, and book 3 is like what's going on in the universe. What I love so much about Conversations with God is that the book is so easy to read, and all the concepts are laid out in a way that's so easy to understand. I love the fact that this book essentially says, take everything you know, toss it out the window, wipe the slate clean, let's start from scratch. I'm going to explain it to you. I read all of the With God books. There was Friendship with God, and then came Communion with God. Home with God is a really great book because they talk about death. And then actually there is a book 4. There's, Conversations with God, book 4. Needless to say, my outlook on life after reading that book was completely different, and for the better. And the other book that changed my life that I feel actually kind of goes hand in hand with Conversations with God is Sculptor in the Sky by Teal Swan. But I think when she wrote it, she was Teal Scott, I believe. I don't have a physical copy of this book. I've only ever had the digital copy. And Sculptor in the Sky is the closest thing to a manual on how to live life that I've ever come across. It's just so clear. It's almost like a step-by-step, how does manifestation work? It's kind of like, if Conversations with God was the why, then Sculptor in the Sky is the how. If you're the person that's always heard about law of attraction and was always like, why? What does that even mean? Where does it come from? It talks about manifestation, why we manifest, how we're able to manifest, and how it fits into our lives. If you've ever had questions about these things, read the book. And now, because this video is getting kind of long, let's go into like the fun extras. The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. This is one of the most beautiful books you will read in your life. It's basically one long poem. This is the only thing I've read by this author, but I love it. The premise of this book is that there's a prophet who lives in a small town, but he has to leave. And the villagers who've been dependent on him for advice say, well, before you leave, can you speak to us on, and each chapter is based on like a different part of life. Can you speak to us on laws, crime and punishment, self-knowledge, teaching, having children, marriage? The answers given in this book will not only make you think, but it's just delivered with so much love and so much empathy. Like, I love this book. And keeping it moving, this is a book that I happened upon. How did I even happen upon this? I don't know. I heard someone talking about it and I set out to find it. It's called The Vampire in Europe by Montague Summers. I was under the impression that Montague Summers was this rich socialite who just had a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of time on his hands. So he was like, I'm gonna go document vampire experiences in Europe. And yes, this is nonfiction, but this book was really interesting because he was actually very meticulous about documenting these encounters. The biggest thing that I remember from this book is learning that there's actually a difference between vampires and revenants. Revenants are not like people vampires, they're just kind of like floating sacks of blood that attack people. This book was published in 1929, I think, so it's kind of hard for me to find this. So if you do find it, it might be a little expensive. In this book, this is really how like it all started for me. This is Mysteries in Fantasies. This is a volume from the Childcraft Encyclopedia, 1986. That tells you how old I am. My grandmother had like a whole bunch of encyclopedias, like adult encyclopedias, and then she had children's encyclopedias. This talks about all of the unexplained paranormal stuff. Yeah. This was really the only volume of that encyclopedia set that I ever came back to because I found it extremely interesting, and I think I was hooked on the paranormal like ever since then. And here's another one. I don't know how I came across this. Is another encyclopedia set called Mysteries of Mind, Space, and Time. I do not know how I came across this. This is different from that Time Life, Mysteries of the Unexplained or something like that. The Elixir of Life. Yeah, this is a whole encyclopedia set about the unexplained, and nothing made me more giddy as a kid. Because I was feeling nostalgic, and I was like, man, whatever happened to those books that I had when I was younger that were like really important to me? Because, you know, my mom is like, there's too much clutter in here. You guys have to get rid of stuff. And eventually I got rid of my encyclopedia set. And then recently, you know, I was like, well, damn it, I want my encyclopedia set back. So, I kind of did some digging on eBay, and then, you know, I just kind of like whispered something in my husband's ear about, gee, there's some books out there that I would really love to have and are really important to me. He picked up what I was putting down, and he actually got me these for Christmas, and I could not be happier. So making that video was actually way more fun than I thought it would be. What a great way to spend a rainy afternoon.